Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. We've got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten. It is the recap episode. Got my guy, Zack Guggenheim, with us here to talk about it all. Zack, you had an eventful day yesterday, a bunch of watch parties, a bunch of people. You had the pellet grill out. How you doing today? Are you recovering from the pellet grill and all the festivities from yesterday?
I think my timing on smoked meat is better than Will Howard's timing on the last 6 seconds of the game. I'll just put it
Wow.
there.
All
So
right. But if you had the antidote of or if he had the antidote of confidence, I think he would have done better, right?
I wish PJ Fleck gave the antidote of confidence a little earlier, and I'm sure most Minnesota fans would have preferred that too.
I think we need to start giving out the antidote of confidence award at the end of every Big Ten game, where it's like, this guy, he obviously drank his antidote before the game and he excelled. So I think that's the new thing we need to do here, Zack.
I as long as the antidote is smoked wings, I'm okay with it.
I listen. Anytime I can get smoked wings, I'm for it as well. So
There we go. There we go.
Yeah. Oh, everybody, we appreciate you being here. We already got people in the chat. Snowbird 67 says, looking forward to this one. And John is here as well. He says, are y'all recovering from the game yesterday? He says that was a heartbreaker. It was. I did a post-game show afterward, and honestly, like, I'm not one of those people that gets too bad if it's a close game. I mean, which is kind of weird. Like, I'm probably one of the most mild-mannered Ohio State fans you'll find, because everybody else was tweeting out, like, fire this person, and, this person needs to never play a game ever again. I know Zack wasn't doing that, but I'm sure you felt it as well, Zack. But for the most part, it's like, I don't get too down on stuff unless something just really embarrassing happens. You should have saw me after Ohio State lost to Clemson 31-0. Whoa, that was bad.
That was rough. That was rough. We'll talk about, I think, some of the outworkings of it at the end of the show. I think if it were just in a vacuum, it was a phenomenal game.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was a bind. I joke about Will Howard with those last 6 seconds, but I thought, Josh Pate talked about it a little bit, and I think he was helpful in just helping people realize, like, there was a lot going on in that last minute, and it's not as easy as people want to say. And I wish they would have gotten a kickoff. But it was just rough. And at the end of the day, it was a great football game. So I'm thankful for that. We'll talk about the context later on tonight, but in general, I'm like, that was 2 versus 3, and it delivered.
Yeah, no, it totally was. Philip says, how is Texas number 1? Oregon should be number 1. I totally agree with you, Philip. I have no idea. We were saying it on the power rankings. If Oregon is not number 1 and Ohio State is not number 3, then these AP folders, like, they just didn't watch the game. Either they didn't watch the game or they don't know what they're doing watching football. Like, this was a game where 2 top 3 teams played, and both teams showed they are top 3 teams. Now, that's not good enough for Ohio State fans. Ohio State fans want to be number 1. So if you hear Ohio State fans complaining, you're like, listen, be happy. You're a top 3 team. You're a top 5 team. That's not how the Ohio State fan mind operates. There's a little craziness in there. So, which that's part of the reason you love Ohio. Well, maybe not everybody loves Ohio State fans. I like Ohio State fans. I think they're kind of crazy, but It is what it is. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, Zack, what do you think? Should Oregon have been number 1? You weren't on the power ranking show to talk about it with us.
I would probably put them number 1, but I can understand why they're not, just because of how they looked early in the season, while Texas has just looked consistently really good. But, like, if you look at Texas's quality of wins, they don't look nearly as good anymore, right? Like, they beat Michigan when they were really high. They have 2 losses. They just beat, honestly, a very overranked Oklahoma team.
That's what I'm saying. I said that at the beginning. I said, because Oklahoma has this 18, this stupid 18 that should not be there. This is a bad Oklahoma team. There is no reason. Oklahoma's played a cupcake schedule this entire way, and they've lost to SEC teams, and so everybody's like, oh, well, the SEC's good. It's just the continued SEC bias. It's crazy.
Is Boise better than Michigan and Oklahoma?
I think they're better than Oklahoma. I think Michigan has more talent than Boise, but Michigan has been so poorly coached. I don't know if, like, I would probably pick them to win the game, but I wouldn't pick them confidently. Just like I didn't pick
Yeah.
Ohio State confidently to beat Oregon. I felt like they would win, but I didn't pick them confidently.
Yeah. Well, my point is, I think Oregon might have 2 better wins than anything that Texas has got.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think about. Again, I'm not saying Oregon or Boise's definitely better, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. And if that's the case, I think quality of wins is certainly better. But Texas has looked dominant. So I think you're splitting hairs. They're clearly 1 and 2.
They're clearly 1 and 2. I would still give, like I said, I'd still give the edge to Oregon just because they have that top tier win. Michigan is not a top tier win. I mean, that is a win that, looked good at the time, but it's not a top tier win. It's a ranked win. They're number 24 in the nation, but it's not a top tier win like beating Ohio State is. So, Dave says USC won ?
I think he's looking at the graphic.
Oh, did I have backward? My bad.
I think you got it before I think you got it before overtime. It was 33-30.
Yeah, I'll fix that really fast. I apologize. Thank you for pointing that out there, Dave. Let's do this one really fast. Snowbird says that game was an instant classic coming from a Duck fan point of view. What'd you think, Zach? You think it was an instant classic?
Absolutely. And Duck fans are chirping after this one, and you absolutely should. Like, this was
Ducks don't chirp though, Zach.
Well, they
say after this. I'm just
they say Aflac. That's right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupt you too much. I'm sure the audience gets mad with it.
Well, whatever. It's all good. But yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, and like there were some bad plays on both sides, but at the end of the day, this was not Alabama, Georgia, where like one team was bad for a half and then the other team was bad for a half.
Yeah.
This was good on good. Like these are clearly, from a talent perspective, 2 of the 3 best teams in college football right now. And I'm sorry, Alabama and Georgia are not good right now. We got clowned in the comments a week ago saying that we shouldn't be saying the SEC stinks because of historical records bear it out. And to what I say is, this is 2024. This is not history.
Yeah.
Alabama, Georgia are not the two of the 3 best teams right now. It's Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, until Georgia and Alabama can prove it otherwise, which I think they can. I think from a roster perspective, they can. But what I saw on the field on Saturday night, those 2 teams are clearly 2 of the 3 best teams in college football.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Wow, you guys got a lot of comments in here. I'm trying to get to all of them. Let's see. Philip says Oregon versus Ohio State could be trilogy. It could be a trilogy this year. It could be 3 games. I mean, buckle up, because if Ohio State continues to play well and Oregon has a pretty soft schedule, which I don't mean that lightly. Like, I'm not saying that derogatory. Like, maybe soft is the wrong word. Like, they don't have the hardest schedule out there, but I'm not going to take that away from Oregon at all this season. If Oregon keeps winning, they got their big win over Ohio State. I don't see any reason why you ding them, because they just keep winning. That shows. Let's see. Doug says Boise State would wipe the field with the cheaters. That's code lingo for Michigan.
Shots fired. Shots fired.
Philip says, did you buy insurance after the game? No, I should have, though. The Ducks really impressed me. I definitely could go with the Duck for my insurance. Dave says, I can see Boise State beating half the Big Ten teams and half of the SEC teams. That's interesting, Zach. What do you think about that?
I think the thing that would be an issue is depth.
Yeah.
So I think they would look good in the first 6-7 games. I think it'd be tough as the season goes on and injuries mount up, because they probably don't have the depth to replace it. But I need to walk back a comment. I said that Henderson and Judkins were better than Gianti. I am completely misspoke. He is the best running back in the country, Ashton Gianti.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the combo of the 2 would have been better. I still think Genty is the best, but I thought the combo of the 2, the fresh legs and stuff like that, would be better. But, I mean, all the credit to the world, and hats off. We'll talk about that game at the end, but all the credit in the world. and hats off to Oregon. I mean, they had struggles and they shot themselves in the foot at times. Holden spitting on a player, all the stuff that happened. Like at the end of the day, this was a game that both teams had mistakes, both teams had issues, and the team that held on till the end of the game, playing the best, most disciplined football at the end of the game, won. So you can't take anything away from anybody, I don't think. Michael says the old Big Ten West dominated this weekend. Just saying. Hey, you know what? It was a great weekend for the Big Ten. And I love that we still hold on to the Big Ten West. We will never forget the Big Ten West.
Yep. We will not.
Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Purdue were one point battle till the end.
Yeah. That was painful watching that score go back and forth. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. That was a fun one. That was a fun one. I just had fun with it, man.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. I think it's all the comments we can get. Mike's in here. LA Bob Boy says Oregon should be number one. Absurd they didn't jump Texas. I agree with you. So, okay. Let's talk about the games, Zach. Our first game was on Friday night, and it was the Northwestern Wildcats beat the Maryland Terrapins 37-10 for their first Big Ten win of the season. Aiden Hubbard's fourth quarter fumble recovery for a touchdown helped Northwestern pull away. Northwestern capitalized on Maryland's 4 turnovers, outscoring them 20-3 in the final quarter of play. Jack Lausch and Cam Porter scored first half touchdowns, with Lausch finishing 10 for 18 for 203 yards. Maryland's Billy Edwards Jr. rushed for a TD and had a costly fumble and completed 28 of 51 passes for 296 yards. Northwestern's defense limited Maryland to 59 rushing yards and forced 3 fourth quarter turnovers. Luke Akers, Northwestern's punter, also kicked he kicked 3 field goals and made all 4 extra points. Maryland dropped to 3-3, continuing a 10-game losing streak after the bye week since 2017. And Mike Locksley now is 6. I forget what exactly I tweeted out. I think it's 6-25 in October in his career. Hard times for Maryland after this game, Zach.
Not only that, he's 1-4 against Northwestern in his career.
Ooh. Not making the Big East proud there. Big Ten West wins that one.
Yeah. We both picked Maryland in this game, I think.
I picked Northwestern.
Or did you pick Northwestern? I was the idiot who picked
I literally said on the show, I said September is over. We're getting into October.
I should have followed your lead on that.
Against Mike Locksley.
It would have been on brand for me to pick against Mike Locksley. So there's a couple things here. I'm gonna pile on Mike Locksley. Don't you worry.
He deserves it.
But can we just take a moment? Like, people were talking about how the honeymoon was over for David Braun. Can we just take a moment and talk about how great of a coach he is? Like, I know Maryland's not good, but like Northwestern is not super talented either. And yet this is a guy who gets the most out of his players. Jack Lausch, who neither of us were super high on. He had an efficient day, 10 of 18, 203 yards. They got Kurtz involved, 3 catches for 123 yards. They got a lot of chunk plays early in this game, which helped them get out to a 17-0 lead. And they turned Maryland over 4 times.
Yep.
That's winning football. And again, the qualifier is Maryland's not that good this year, but it would not shock me. I'm not picking this, but it would not shock me if even with the talent deficit, David Braun somehow makes it to a second consecutive bowl. This guy can coach. His coaching staff is figuring it out. Zach Lujan figuring it out, how to dial up plays for his quarterback, how to get his receivers open. And I love the defense. Man, this defense is rock solid. And they have a good defensive line rotation. Just can't say enough good things about a team that has explosive players, Maryland, holding them to 10 points, under 400 yards, turning them over 4 times. You can't say enough about this performance by the Wildcats.
I like Doug's comment here. He says Brown would make a great defensive coordinator. For certain defensive coordinators, let go of his big jog. Just saying. I think I know who you're talking about there, Doug. Yeah, no, all the praise in the world goes to David Braun. I mean, this is a team that early on in the year, you could see the talent deficiency in a lot of the games they played. I mean, it looked like Duke had more talent than them early on in the season. Now, that was still when you had Mike Wright starting, and Mike Wright was a little bit more sporadic with his play than Jack Lausch is. I question if Jack Lausch should be the starter, but I mean, it is proving out that he was the right guy for this job. He is not turning the ball over excessively. He is not putting the team in a bad place, to lose games. And honestly, like, I should have seen it coming. I should have seen that Jack Lausch coming in from Mike Wright is essentially what I was vying for Brendan Sullivan to come in for Cade McNamara. I thought that was the backup quarterback that needed to come in. Still could be, but this was the backup quarterback that needed to come in because Jack Lausch is doing good things for this team. And David Braun has proved that, hey, it took him a little while to get going this season, but this is a good win for them. Granted, it was pulling away in the fourth quarter, so the blowout doesn't look like it was a dominance the entire game, but still they won the rest of the game and really took care of business. So I don't think there's really much more you can say other than Mike Loxley bad, David Braun good.
Yeah, and I think part of this, particularly for Loxley, is optics do matter. If Maryland squeaked this out, it looks a lot better for Maryland. It's just like, oh, you missed. It's just clock management issues. But the way it looks, and honestly, like, they did control the game, like, from start to finish. It just, the score ballooned in the fourth quarter. But even then, the optics of it, to lose by 4 possessions to an academic school, right? Like a school that is not supposed to be an athletic powerhouse. You lose 37-10 at home. I get it. It's October. But now Mike Loxley 1-4, I don't know what to say about the Terps because from a talent, like from a recruiting perspective, they've done fairly well, but their player development has not been good. Their ability to compete in October has not been good. And every year that they've supposed to been competing at a higher level, they've failed. Mm-hmm. And now we knew they weren't going to be great this year, but now they're losing the games that they needed to win. Like, this is not a bowl team this year. I don't know if they win another game this season.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to take a look at their schedule, I think that there has to be at least one win on the schedule. I mean, Maryland does have an opportunistic defense that can turn the ball over. I mean, Ty Fountain has played like one of the best wide receivers in college football this game. He only had 9 receptions for 77 yards. That should tell you how good he's been, that, we say he only had that much. They play USC, Minnesota, Oregon, Rutgers, Iowa, Penn State. Yeah, you're right. This is not looking good.
Yeah, I mean, the way Rutgers has looked, maybe Rutgers.
Yeah, but still, the Rutgers trenches have to be better than what Maryland is putting out there. I mean,
yeah. This is, I don't know if they get another win.
Last question, and then we'll move on. How long does David Braun stay at Northwestern?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because if somebody comes over and hires Kirk Sneddie away from Indiana, I don't want that to happen. I think that there's a chance it couldn't happen, but if it does happen, couldn't you see Indiana trying to get David Braun?
I don't think he leaves for Indiana. No offense to Indiana.
It depends on how things are going. I think if things are not going well and Kirk Sneddie has been there for a couple years, you could see it happen, and he's really built up the program. You could see it possibly happen, but like this offseason, no, that's not going to happen. But in a couple years, if things are not looking good for Northwestern and Kirk Sneddie has built things up at Indiana, I think it's possible.
What about I might go higher here. What about Michigan?
See, I think Michigan would hire Kirk Sneddie before they hire David Braun. But I don't know. I guess I don't know if Kirk Sneddie would do it.
Well, I think they're going to wait a year or two, though, because I think they have the guy.
Who, Michigan?
Yeah. I think
the fans don't think that.
Well, I would imagine they'll give
him gone.
Oh, well, you don't think they'll give him another couple years?
Oh, I think they have to, but his buyout is only $5 million. Like they structured that contract well. So
Yeah. Where are we in society where a buyout is only $5 million? My goodness. Only. That's the key word there.
uh,
Oh,
it's an interesting thing to think about. But yeah, I
yeah.
mean Northwestern definitely they're gonna have to get to a bowl game again before that happens. But
Yeah.
David Braun's a good coach. I hope Northwestern hangs on to him because it'd be
Yeah.
good for them. So
I think to that point, I think I wonder if he'll be like Pat Fitzgerald in a way in terms of culture building. And I wonder if it takes a while to get him away from there.
yeah. Yeah, I mean David Braun seems like a loyal guy. So if you know, if he's loyal and wants to stick around, that would be awesome. I hope he is
Yeah.
because I really like David Braun at
Yeah.
Northwestern. Dave says David has kept up the Pat Fitzgerald tradition minus the sexual harassment, which is very good. If you don't have the sexual harassment, things are going well at Northwestern for that.
Yeah.
And Doug wants to make sure I was just making the comment, JR, not a fire. I know you're not a fire, everybody, Doug. We went through that a little bit on the Ohio State post game show because there was a bunch of people in the comments saying fire this person. I was like, guys, listen, I'm upset too, but anyway, we'll talk about it when we get to the Ohio State. We're gonna
have a lot of fire on the Ohio State call-in show tomorrow, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll see. We might. So, all right, let's talk about Minnesota and UCLA. Zach, Minnesota rallied to a 21-17 victory over UCLA with a late touchdown to Darius Taylor's 27 seconds remaining. Max Brosmer led the comeback, completing 4 passes on the final drive, including game-winning 4-yard touchdown to Taylor. Minnesota trailed 10-0 at halftime, but scored 2 third-quarter touchdowns to take the lead, including a 1-yard run by Taylor. UCLA regained the lead late with a 42-yard touchdown, but couldn't hold it after Minnesota answered in the final minute. Ethan Garbers threw for 293 yards for UCLA, but his last-second Hail Mary was intercepted again by the kid, Coy Parrish. Minnesota improves to 4-3. UCLA remains winless in the Big Ten at 1-5. PJ Fleck said it himself. They kept drinking the antidote. And at this point, I would chug the antidote every single day, PJ. Every day. Zach, your thoughts?
I think they waited till the third quarter to drink it. I think they thought they didn't need it.
They got into the
first
PJ
half.
was like, guys,
drink the Sprite. Drink it. I mean, I think that the thing I would say is, at least for UCLA, I continue to think there's at least something there because they had a shot to win this game.
They have,
and
they have,
and like they kept it, like they didn't. I was about to say they kept it close against Penn State. Penn State didn't slaughter them like I thought they would, and they kept it close with LSU for a half, and so like I hate to justify this because I do think there's some coaching issues there.
With UCLA?
With UCLA.
Oh, yeah, there's tons of coaching
issues. Yeah, tons of coaching issues. But I think the effort is there. And the problem is their schedule is awful.
Yes.
So I think there's coaching issues. It's compounded by the fact that they don't have, no offense to Rutgers, a Rutgers schedule. Mm-hmm. Like if they have Rutgers schedule, they might be 3-3 at this point, maybe even 4-2. But they're 1-5 because they played Hawaii and then they've played a bunch of teams who are actually pretty good. So I think that's the problem for UCLA. Bruin Source, Kevin over at Bruin Source, he tweeted out, he wonders if UCLA would have won if Kevin Martin played instead of Ethan Garbers. I'm not so sure about that. Justin Martin, not Kevin Martin. Gosh. Justin Martin, if he played. And I don't know, because I think Justin Martin got the benefit of playing a Penn State team that was kind of like, oh, you're here. Cool. We're just going to play and, play not to kill you. But it is interesting because I do think Justin Martin has some talent. But ultimately, I think that the picks were ultimately their undoing. But credit to Minnesota to travel on the road, to battle adversity. Coy Parrish, man, I think we said he was going to be an impact freshman preseason, and he has been everything. I think 4 picks over,
Yeah.
like tied for
In
the
the last 2 weeks on Hail Marys.
yeah. So like he is dynamite, man. And then Brosmer is really stepping up, and that's without a running game, driving them down the field to finish that game off. Dude's a gamer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this was the game where you saw PJ Fleck start to marry the running game with Max Brosmer in the second half to what you kind of liken it to be. I really like Max Brosmer. I've said it multiple times. I wish we were getting more of Max Brosmer in the Big Ten. I think he's good for Minnesota when they utilize him the right way. And I think that Darius Taylor eventually got free because, let's be honest, it's really hard to hold Darius Taylor back for an entire game. He's just such a good running back, and what he is able to do is it's something not every single back in the country can do with how he runs the ball and how tough and how physical he is. So this was a game where I felt like PJ started to marry those two things. And I mean, I don't know if you heard the speech after the game, Zach, but PJ Fleck talking about how the guys on his teams, they're going to be husbands, they're going to be lawyers, they're going to be teachers someday. I mean, all that stuff. Like, I know people give PJ Fleck his crap, and you and I love the antidote of confidence. Like, we are not disparaging PJ Fleck when we talk about that. Is just his personality, and it's a piece of him in the Big Ten that I actually really like. Because he brings his own personality to his coaching. I think some of the, like the Fleck coins when those came out, thought that was kind of weird, but you know what? If your team buys into it, who am I to say it doesn't work? But just hearing PJ Fleck talk about all that at the end of the game, like it is so cool to hear about all that, all that's going on in that program. That PJ Fleck, not only is he trying to build a winning football program, but he's trying to get these guys to win on the field. And I know there's no moral victories, yada yada yada, but it matters something to me that a coach is trying to actually do that with his team, and it's not Georgia where everybody's getting arrested.
Yeah. Oh gosh, don't get me started on Georgia. Well, and to that point, I have been very hard on PJ, but the turnaround that he's had with this team, like the team could easily quit. And Kesich struggled again in this game with kicks, and it could be easy just to go down the toilet, just mentally. And instead, he's kept his team engaged. They're 4-3. I would have thought they would have dropped another game by now. I thought they would have lost to USC a week ago and didn't even know if they could go on the road and get UCLA with the way they were trending. The fact that they're 4-3, like they have a shot to get bowl eligible after a really terrible start to the season. Like that's credit to PJ Fleck. And I think to your point too, he gets it not just from a football perspective, but he gets it from a life perspective. And I think we can all applaud that.
Yeah. And I know, like I said, if you talk about this on the big channels where all they talk about is Ohio State, Oregon, which we do talk about those games, but we want to mention everybody in the Big Ten, and we want to mention everybody's traditions and things like that. Now, we're not perfect. We don't know every single tradition and what goes on, but we definitely want to highlight when there are coaches out there that are doing a good job of not just winning on the football field, but also helping their players win at life and do those things. So, and I think PJ Fleck deserves a lot of credit here for that. Not saying, nobody else does, just in this moment, that moment on TV, that was cool to see. Let's see. Got a couple comments here. Fair Catch says, big fan of these smaller channels. Thanks for the show, you guys. We appreciate you being here, Fair Catch. We are not the biggest channel in the world, but we like to put out content, and we're thankful that people like you guys watch. Snowbird asks, what teams have the biggest rivalry in the Big Ten? I think obviously Ohio State, Michigan is probably the biggest. That's arguably the biggest in college football. Minnesota, Wisconsin is not far behind. Iowa, Nebraska, Michigan, Michigan State, USC, UCLA. I'm not naming them in order. I'm just naming them as I think of them. Am I missing any here, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously USC, UCLA now, and Oregon, Washington.
Washington, yeah.
I would say the best trophy game is Minnesota and Wisconsin battle for the axe. That thing is awesome. Like, I want to win an axe.
That is the coolest trophy in all of college football games. Yeah. I love that trophy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me the
lamest rivalry, I'll tell you, is the manufactured Penn State, Michigan State one, where the trophy is just like, they were like, let's build the biggest trophy possible.
The land grant trophy.
was like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I love a good rivalry trophy, but I was like, what in the world's going on here? But yeah, I guess if I'd have to give my top 3 of like original Big Ten, so I'm leaving Oregon, Washington, and USC, UCLA out, not because they're not as big, but just like original Big Ten here, because I think that's what Snowbird is primarily asking. The big 3 that I've noticed are probably Ohio State, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the third one's hard for me, Iowa and somebody, whoever they hate most.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe Iowa, Wisconsin.
Yeah. Or Iowa, Minnesota.
Yeah.
Or Iowa, Nebraska. I don't know. Iowa's got a lot of rivals.
Yeah, Iowa does. Well, they have what 3 protected rivals with the expanded Big Ten.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
Yeah. It is insane. Doug says Floyd of Rosedale is the coolest trophy. I forget which one is that. There's so many trophies.
That's Iowa, Minnesota. It's the pig.
Yes. That is a cool trophy. I remember that one.
Yeah.
So, the Black Friday rivalry, very good. Yes, and IU Purdue, that is a very underrated rivalry as well.
The old Oaken Bucket.
Yep, the old Oaken Bucket. That's a very underrated one. So, Philip, Iowa.
Oh man,
that's why. Robe Dust 58. I enjoy the deep dive you guys put into each matchup analysis of each game. Also, not a lot of bias towards one team. W Podcast. Appreciate that. Yeah, we try not to be super biased. I acknowledge there's always bias. You can't get away from it, but we try not to have too much bias. So we appreciate that. So, and we do try to go as deep as we can. So I don't know. I feel like that game we just kind of talked about PJ Fleck, but overall, I mean, UCLA's just got to finish. Like, I don't know what else to say about UCLA at this point. They just got to finish. But for me, if you can't finish a game, that's on coaching, i.e. team we'll talk about later on. But when it comes down to it, like that's on your coaching if you can't finish games, and the coaches have to figure that out. I'm not saying anybody should be fired over it or anything like that, but the coaches have to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, I think Deshaun Foster needs to ask PJ Fleck to see if he can get some of that antidote, because I think his guys needed it with like 20 seconds left. So
did you see like Deshaun Foster going over to the Minnesota locker room afterward with his heads up, like, hey man, can I get some of that antidote of confidence? It's like, well, I only have so much left, Deshaun. Don't say my name.
Hey, we live in LA. Can we get some of that antidote? Yeah. Sorry, I do. I mean, I know he has struggled, but I like Deshaun as a person.
I do too. He has some endearing aspects to him. I wasn't sure how I would feel about him from the beginning, but like the way he started Big Ten Media Days and everything, I want him to be around for a long time. And the fact that he's an alumni, I want him to be around. I just don't know if he's going to be.
Yeah.
All right. JR, I can't remember writing those reviews. JK, I enjoy the show. No, you will not catch my wife watching this show. She hates football, and you will not catch her watching the show hearing me talk about football. So if she's giving a review, she's probably giving it a 1 star. I'm lying. I make my wife sound mean. She supports me on Instagram because she's on Instagram all the time. So she likes any of my posts I put on Instagram, which, by the way, go follow the Big Ten Huddle, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all those places. All right, Zach, we will get really fast to a commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about what game is next? Purdue, Illinois. All right, overtime game. We'll be right back. Have you ever wanted to watch all 22 film, that film the coaches watch? Well, now you can. Introducing the Coaches Film Room. Over at Minutes to Sports, former college coach Zach Smith breaks down film of the most relevant teams in college football with a bit of a Big Ten lead. It's not free, so you'll need to sign up for the Colonel tier, which is $25 a month, but I can attest to you that it is far more worth it than that. With about 4 to 8 games per week, this is worth so much more money, not to mention Zach's analysis, making you a smarter football fan. Go check it out. The links are in the description, minutestosports.com. You won't be sorry. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle. Please do like and subscribe. We appreciate it if you do that. Also listen to us on podcasts, Apple, Spotify, all those different places. You can check us out over there. Purdue at Illinois. Illinois, the number 23 team in the nation. Well, I guess they're what now? 21, 22? They moved up a little bit. I forget exactly where
I think they're 22.
22. Okay.
I need to look.
Excellent. They defeated not ranked Purdue 50-49 in overtime. Luke Altmaier threw a 25-yard touchdown pass to Pat Bryant. Oh my gosh, Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin are so good. Illinois sealed the win with a sack on Purdue's 2-point conversion attempt. Illinois' David Alano kicked a 38-yard field goal to tie the game as 43 as the time expired. Purdue down 27-3 at halftime launched a big comeback. Purdue's quarterback Ryan, is it Brownie or Brown? I can't remember.
I thought it was Brown. I could be
I
Brownie. Somebody
Brown.
tell us in the comments.
Yeah, I think it's
Brownie. Okay.
Or it is Brownie?
No, I think it's Brown, but
okay. Well, in his first career start, 297 yards, 3 touchdowns, and ran for 118 yards, but he was not better than Luke Altmaier, who threw for 379 yards and 3 touchdowns. Illinois snapped a long losing streak to Purdue, having last one at home against them in 2010. Purdue has lost 5 straight games this season. Things are looking up for Purdue, Zach, after this game, but ultimately they still lose it out here. What's your thoughts?
Well, kudos to Ryan Walters for making a change at quarterback. And, I thought Hudson Card would have been better. And I don't know, was it ever disclosed if he was injured or he was just pulled?
I think they had concussion protocol, but at this point in the season, like, I don't know. If somebody's a senior like that, you might just be using it as an excuse. I don't know. I mean,
yeah. Well, either way, really putting Brown in a place to succeed and then seeing him do well against, to Philip's point, a defense without Xavier Scott, that obviously made a difference. But this Illinois defense has been very good, and they were not very good in this game. And I think Brown was a big part of that. They ran the ball effectively with him.
Oh, good in the first half.
Yeah, they were good in the first half. That's very true. Good in the first half. But, Purdue, to their credit, they hung in there and made it a ball game in the second half. And I mean, probably should have beat Illinois, which is not a vote of confidence with Illinois going to Michigan next week.
I think if they didn't score so easily on that overtime, it was the first play of overtime, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think so. It was a 25-yard touchdown pass. If
Illinois did not score so easily on that very first play, I contend they probably would have kicked the field goal and tried to go into a second overtime. But I think the ease with which Luke Altmaier threw that pass to Pat Bryant and scored, I think Ryan Walters, they scored, and he was like, we got to go for this, which I don't hate the decision. No. I probably would have made the same decision too, but that's a heartbreaker, taking that sack at the end. Ryan Brown, he was doing his best to get out of there, but that was a heartbreaking moment for I recorded it and put it on Twitter, and that was tough to watch for them. I mean, good for Illinois. Obviously, I'm rooting for Illinois as well. I like Illinois. But that was a heartbreaking moment for Purdue and their fans.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think there is at least some hope now for Purdue that they might be able to outscore some people. I will say this makes me a little more curious for Oregon traveling to Ross-Ade. I'm not saying that it will do anything, but there's a curiosity of what can Purdue do. I doubt it's much, but I'm at least curious.
Yeah, when we talked early on about this, we kind of labeled this as maybe a potential trap game for Oregon coming off Ohio State. If they won that game and it was a big, into the battle game, which it was, then you could see Oregon coming to Ross-Ade on a short week on a Friday night and possibly, tripping up or just struggling more than they should against Purdue. But I don't know. Like I do look at this game and say Purdue was good and, came back in the game and stuff like that. But I still just think Oregon is so supremely talented that they should take care of business just fine. Like if they don't, that's a coaching issue on Dan Lanning, because at the end of the day, like they should have no struggles with Purdue. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful toward Purdue, but they should have no struggles.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I'm just, it makes me interested, especially with Brown being a freshman. I'm like, this is something you can build on. I don't know if Ryan Walters will be the guy that helps them get there, but if they can keep Brown and they can build off of that, it's at least a step in the right direction for them. And they need anything they can get at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Robe says it's sad to see all the decommits over the past 2 weeks for Purdue. Walters has to start really making some changes. This might be his last year. Yeah, it might be. I mean, if they don't start winning some games, at least one more game, two more games here, this could be bad, and Ryan Walters could be looking for a new job, which he should find a DC job. He was a good DC for Illinois, so he should find one. But Phillips calling a shot here. He says, I'm calling my shot. Purdue wins one more game. They beat Indiana. Ooh. That would be quite the upset. Ooh. That'd be quite the upset. Jason says Michigan should start Orgy in this game. I think he's talking about the Illinois-Michigan game coming up this weekend. They'll run for 400 in Champaign. I don't know. I feel like Jack Tuttle was a better scrambler and doing better job of getting yards with his feet. I know Orgy's listed as or labeled as the big time runner and stuff like that. And he definitely has running ability, so you can run plays for him. But I mean, Jack Tuttle seemed to be the better scrambler, and they seem to respect his arm more to actually get out of the pocket and run up the field. So Jack Tuttle might run for some yards in this one.
Yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what Michigan ends up doing. I need to touch base with him. I'm going to be on the Out of the Blue podcast tomorrow, and maybe I can pick their brains and be like, who's starting on Saturday for against the Illini?
It has to be Tuttle.
Maybe. I don't know. You know me. I'm still kind of out on it.
Yeah, we'll preview it on Tuesday. We'll
preview it. I'll see if I can get some inside info on Monday for the Tuesday preview.
There you go. So what was it for you that was kind of like the falling apart moment here in this game? And then we'll move on to the next one for Illinois, right? I mean, when me and Kent talked about it on the Power Rankings episode, we had people tell us you guys are crazy. Illinois should move down. I feel like this was more an indictment on Purdue not giving up and making plays and staying in the game, and Ryan Brown really wanting this for his team and trying to will his team to victory in this one, doing everything he could. Obviously, Illinois should not have Purdue coming back. They're the better team, but I feel like this is one of those classic college football games where a team that had no business being in the game, they just willed themselves because they cared so much and they cared so deeply about the win. And Illinois just made a few costly turnovers here and there.
Yeah. And I wonder,
one turnover, the fumble,
Xavier Scott being out, Illinois is not, I don't think they have the depth that other teams do. And sometimes that really shows up and teams can scheme around that. And so I'm curious what this game looks like with Xavier Scott in it, because I think my guess is Purdue can't mount the comeback that they came out. They probably don't see the same holes. It was 27-3 with 11 minutes left in the third quarter. And so you think, all right, you're up 3 scores, borderline 4 scores. You're probably in the driver's seat. We can probably start thinking about kind of going home. And I wonder if it was a multitude of things. I think part of it could have been Purdue seizing opportunities, but also, Illinois starting to play soft and starting to be like, all right, we're up 24 points. We're in good shape. And then things kind of get away from you a little bit.
Yeah. No, it's definitely possible. I think that probably did play a factor into it with, maybe looking ahead too much for the Michigan game coming up, which how could you not? I mean, this is a huge game for Illinois coming up. Michigan only favored by 2 points as Jason points out for us. Michigan only favored by 2 points. This is a very winnable game for Illinois coming up. And it would be, it would be a huge moment for Illinois if they're able to take down Michigan, the 3-time winners of the Big Ten the past 3 years. So if they're able to do that, that would be huge. But I think at the end of the day, you just got to give credit to Illinois here. They let up the lead, but they fought back. They got the field goal at the end of the game with time expiring. They went into overtime. First play, overtime, touchdown Pat Bryant. And then when Purdue decided to go for 2, they said, not happening. So
Yep.
I walk away. Yes, it's not great for Illinois, but they showed the resilience even with starters out. And, Caden Fagan looks like he's going to be out for a while. I was talking to Sonny about that. He thinks Caden Fagan's probably going to be out for a while. So we'll see what happens there.
I think next week we learn more about, I think similar to like how we learned a lot about Illinois, I think in the Penn State game, I think we learn a lot about Illinois next week against Michigan.
I agree. Who's Purdue play next week?
That's a good question. Let me check real quick.
I had the schedule.
Right. Oh, they play Oregon. They play Oregon on Friday.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were just talking about that.
Yeah.
Listen, if Oregon and Illinois both win next week, my power rankings are going to be cooked. My last place team will beat the first place team. I can't imagine it happens, but after what Purdue did this week, who knows? So, all right, let's get on to the next game here, Zach. We have Wisconsin at Rutgers. Oh boy. Wisconsin defeats Rutgers 42-7. Wisconsin star Tywee Walker ran for 198 yards and 3 touchdowns. Braden Locke threw for 240 yards and 1 touchdown and rushed for another. Wisconsin outgained Rutgers in this one 549 to 271 with 309 rushing yards. Oh my gosh. Walker's 55-yard touchdown run was the longest of the season. Kyle Monungai's 72 rushing yards and 1 13-yard TD in the fourth quarter. Rutgers, they dropped passes. They failed on fourth down. They had bad snaps on a field goal attempt, or had a bad snap on a field goal attempt. At the end of the day, Wisconsin Luke Fickell was pleased with their growth, and Greg Schiano called Rutgers' performance, quote, unacceptable. Zach, do you agree this was unacceptable for Rutgers?
100%. 100%. And Peter pointed out they were injured, that had a lot of injuries from the Nebraska game. I get that. But man, the effort, like I don't know if I've seen them be this effortless. Lacking effort in the Schiano era. I mean, this took me back to Chris Ash days. That's how bad this was. And I think it was a bit of both. Like that I think Wisconsin's found its groove. Like I think they're starting to look better and better under Luke Fickell and the offensive coordinators.
Phil Longo.
Phil Longo. I'm like, I know that name. But like it looks like they're starting to figure it out. So like and even Braden Locke looks a bit more confident, which I've given him a lot of junk the past couple weeks. But I think what was really staggering, it wasn't just that Wisconsin looked good, it's that Rutgers looked like they belonged at the bottom of the pack. And that's really alarming because I thought from a defensive perspective, they were going to really be able to compete. I thought Kaliak Manis would be better than this. And I know receivers dropped a lot of balls. He does not look like he's improved. If I'm being completely honest, like I think we were told in the preseason that he was going to be a not just an upgrade, but a major upgrade from Wimsatt. I'm not so sure that Wimsatt's the better, I hate to come back to this, but that the running ability might actually open up more running lanes. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think at this point, I don't really go back to the quarterback decisions too much, just because it to me it's beating a dead horse a little bit. But I mean, just looking at Kaliak Manis and what he did in this game, he threw the ball away way too early. A lot of times I felt like he could have, maybe maneuvered the pocket a little bit well. I mean, he's a big guy. And Wisconsin's defensive line, of course, they're obviously big guys as well, but he should be strong enough to maneuver around the pocket and break through some arm tackles and keep the play alive. But he doesn't seem to be as willing to do that at times. And I don't really know what the problem is. Like, I agree Gavin Wimsatt had better legs, obviously, but Kaliak Manis, like, he shouldn't be a statue. He needs to use his legs a little bit. But ultimately, what this comes down to for me is that Rutgers was just never able to get their running game going. And when you don't have a running game and you're Rutgers, I mean, they've improved at wide receiver, Dymere Miller, Chris Long, like they've improved at wide receiver, but these are still, they're not the best wide receivers in the Big Ten. So when you're at 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 8. I think in the entire game, at least at one point when I looked in the middle of the fourth quarter, they had 1 third down of 4 yards or less. 1 third down of 4, like
not acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, we can say that Athan Kaliakmanis isn't as good as Gavin Wimsatt, but you didn't bring Athan Kaliakmanis to come in and convert 3rd and 8s and 3rd and 9s. Like, you brought Athan Kaliakmanis in to be a game manager who can have a really good running game and get the ball out to playmakers that they brought in through the portal. You didn't ask him to come in and start converting 3rd and 9s and 3rd and 8s. And
Right.
like that to me is the root cause of Rutgers' struggles here. And hats off to Wisconsin. They smelled blood in the water and they attacked and they did everything they were supposed to do in this game to just beat Rutgers down and beat them into submission. 42-7. This looks like a completely new, completely revitalized Wisconsin team. Felt like maybe that spark was gone after the USC second half when they kind of fell apart there, but they come out against Purdue, rock them. They come out here against Rutgers, they rock them. I'm gonna be really interested to see where Wisconsin goes from here, because this is starting to look like the Wisconsin team that you and I thought it would be, and it's crazy because it looks like it with their second string quarterback and their second string running back like last season, Zach.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, Tyree Walker looks like a dude.
Yeah. And this is a bad run defense. Like, Rutgers does not have a bad run defense. It's not great, but it's not been bad this year.
Yeah. Which I think, if I'm honest, that's probably the more disappointing thing about Rutgers. I think we knew Rutgers offensively, they would do well to have an 80th best offense in the country or 90th best offense in the country. Like, we're not expecting high flying, but they needed to be more competent. But the defense, and I know there are injuries and whatnot, but this defense looked like they were a shell of themselves. And I think kudos to Tyree Walker, who looked like a stud. And Braden Locke, I think, has really flipped the switch. And I think Rutgers defensively, like, I don't know what that was, but it's not the Rutgers defense I've ever expected the past couple of years. And and I know Shiano says it's unacceptable, but then my question is, okay, Greg, like, you got to look at yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
Because how did you prepare these guys to play?
Yeah, exactly. What kind of team did you roll out there? Did you think it was an acceptable team? Because from start to finish, this did not look like an acceptable team in my mind. I mean, they were so much worse pass blocking than they were the rest of the year. Of course, they had those issues against Nebraska, but you could argue that the weather and all that stuff really mucked that game up and made it difficult. But their run blocking was awful. Their defense overall was awful. They did a pretty good job tackling, but they had no pass rush. They weren't able to stop the run. Like, there was nothing in this game that I can point to and be like, okay, Rutgers has that to build on going from here. There wasn't anything that I could look at and say they have something to build on. That's just me.
Yeah.
Which is tough because Rutgers is one of those teams that I really wanted to see win this season with their schedule and everything else. And they were kind of a dark horse and stuff like that. But, it is what it is. On the flip side, Wisconsin, they look unstoppable at this point. The run blocking still isn't there, but the pass pro has been just absolutely fantastic the past few weeks. I don't know what it is about this team with the offensive line being able to pass block so well, but the run blocking struggles. However, they're able to do it. And Braden Locke, I think that's a key reason why he is able to sit back there and pick apart a defense, is because he has time and he can do that. And even though the pass rush wasn't great for Wisconsin in this one, they were able to stop the run. They were able to cover well and helped out by a few drops here and there. But at the end of the day, this was a team that they stopped the run. They put Rutgers in third and long situations, and that's how you really stop Rutgers.
Yep. Yeah. One last thought before we move on. Rutgers has a must-win game next week against UCLA, and it's at home. But all of a sudden, that game looks a lot more interesting after UCLA nearly beat Minnesota.
Yeah.
And if Rutgers doesn't win that one, all the forget, can they win 10 wins? It becomes, can they make a bowl game? Because their schedule, UCLA, USC, Minnesota, Maryland, Illinois, Michigan State, like, I'm not sure what that, like, if they continue at this trajectory, I become very concerned for them.
Yeah, the schedule definitely looks harder than it once did. Even though USC is not the team that, we kind of thought they would be, this is still a team with a lot of talent and a team that is very able to win. Now, Rutgers defense has to be able to get some pass rush, but you're right about UCLA. Like, they're going to have to figure out how to win that one. Illinois is looking much better. Minnesota is looking much better. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Minnesota, goes into Rutgers and wins that game at this point.
Yep.
So it's just crazy to see how it all happens. But, that's kind of where we're at with Rutgers right now.
Yep.
So, all right. Hit a commercial really fast, then we'll come back. Sorry, I thought I saw a comment earlier. We will hit a commercial really fast. We'll be right back, and we will talk about Washington and Iowa. Stay with us. The Big Ten Huddle is brought to you by the College Huddle, the largest fan-led college sports podcast community on the internet. With contributors from 70 different schools, you will get in all kinds of analysis from all over the country. Go visit thecollegehuddle.com to find your team and read articles from all across so many fans and contributors. The College Huddle is fan-made, fan-driven, and fan-fueled. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, on the Big Ten Huddle YouTube channel, also on the podcast, and also simulcasting on the Voice of College Football Big Ten channel. We appreciate the Voice of College Football as well. You can catch Zach and I over on the Ohio State channel of the Voice of College Football doing a call-in show tomorrow night at 9 o'clock. If you want to call in, talk Ohio State, you can do that, or you can call in and just talk Big Ten as well. It doesn't matter. That's just where we're hosting the video at. So come on over there, check us out, and watch and call in. We'd appreciate it. All right, Washington at Iowa. Iowa beats Washington 40-16, marking Kirk Ferentz's 200th win at Iowa, making him the second all-time in Big Ten victories behind Woody Hayes. Caleb Johnson led Iowa with 166 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns, 2 rushing, 1 receiving, highlighting his breakout season. Cade McNamara threw 2 touchdown passes, including one to Dayton Howard in the fourth quarter. I love that name, Dayton Howard. Iowa's defense made key plays, including a blocked field goal, an interception, and forced fumble, leading to field goals. Washington tied the game early 7-7, but couldn't capitalize on multiple opportunities, getting stopped 3 times on 4th down in the second half. Will Rogers and Desmond Williams Jr. each threw a touchdown for Washington, but the efforts fell short. Iowa improves to 4-2, 2-1 in the Big Ten, while Washington drops to 4-3, 2-2 in the Big Ten. Let's start with Iowa here, Zach. What's your thoughts on Iowa's win over Washington?
They scored 40 points. Look out for the new offensive juggernaut. That score is so misleading, by the way.
Yeah.
They only had 328 yards. But
defense helps.
Yeah, I do think it speaks to Iowa's relative strength. Like, they're 4-2. Their 2 losses are to, I think, an elite Ohio State team and a really good Iowa State team that honestly they should have beat.
Yeah.
I mean,
we were talking about this on the Power Rankings episode. Like, Kent and I both have Iowa behind Nebraska and behind Illinois. There is a serious argument for Iowa should be up at 5th right now, even with 2 losses. Their losses to Ohio State and Iowa State, both. I mean, I think Iowa State's a top 10 team right now. I don't know the Big 12 as well. I apologize. But, I mean, these are still 2 highly ranked teams. Ohio State in the top 4, Iowa State, if they're not top 10.
They're still undefeated, yeah. I think they're top.
So, I mean, like, you look at this Iowa team and, like, we were talking early on about how Michigan didn't have any bad losses because they lost to Texas. We got to revert that narrative over here to Iowa now, because if they're blowing Washington out 40-16 and their only losses are two top 10 teams.
Yep. When they blew out Minnesota. Iowa State's number 9 in the country right now.
Yeah.
And they lost to them by a point, and they should have won.
They should have won 19-0 at the halftime.
Yeah. So I think Iowa is proving that they are actually a pretty good team, which I think we thought they would be. Caleb Johnson.
He's been the difference maker, man.
So good. He's so freaking good. Like, I don't understand it, because you're like, you know what's coming. Like, it's not going to be a Cade McNamara throw. Like, they're not going to. And it's like, oh, there's 9 defenders there. Oh, it doesn't matter. He's just going to run through them and get 5 yards. Oh, he's going to get 6 yards. Oh, he's going to get a 30-yard touchdown. Like, what the heck? The
I'm gonna be
dude's awesome.
I'm gonna be completely honest, Zach. Iowa is starting to look like this year what I thought Michigan was going to look like, where they had a running back in Donovan Edwards who was just going to, do a really good job. He's super athletic and he'd be able to run all over teams, and that would kind of be their offense. A little bit of a questionable quarterback with a Davis Warren, Alex Orji, whoever it was going to be, but good enough to help them win games. And then you had a defense that was just out. That's what I thought Michigan was going to be this season. I thought Iowa would kind of be Michigan light. Turns out Michigan is Iowa light right now. And Iowa is the team that is really perfecting the run the ball really well and have a really good defense behind them that just basically wins you the game.
Yeah.
So.
And they're, I don't like, McNamara's not great. He didn't look, he kind of looked okay in this game. And the receivers at times had good plays in this game. So, they're not world beaters, but they beat the stuffing out of Washington yesterday.
It's true. It's true. They did. I love this comment from John here. Don't apologize for not knowing something about the Big 12. I find that
so good.
Dave says the offensive line is amazing. They're the reason why this running back is able to get the yards that he does. I don't want to take anything away from Caleb Johnson. I think Caleb Johnson is fantastic, but you're absolutely right, Dave.
Yes.
This offensive line has been fantastic for Iowa, and it's one of the reasons why I had confidence in Ohio State being able to stop Oregon's offensive efficiency in the run game, is because they stopped Iowa and their offensive line. They were able to stop them, but Iowa, even though they got stopped, they're not going to get down about it. They're going to come out this next game against Washington, who doesn't have a bad run defense. I'm not saying it's great, but if they don't have a bad run defense, and Caleb Johnson was just able to run all over them, and of course, Cade McNamara was able to throw the ball. What was he, like 8 for 14 or something like that?
Yeah.
He only had to throw the ball complete the ball 8 times, but he got 100 yards from it, so can't really complain too much.
It's enough. It's enough.
It's enough. The Penn State guy says McNamara is a game manager that gives you a little extra sometimes. A little extra sometimes. Sometimes it's for the good, sometimes it's for the bad. That Iowa State game, I think you would say he gave you a little extra in the bad. That one, but you're right. I mean, I have such a hard time with Cade McNamara because I feel like anything Cade McNamara can do, Brendan Sullivan would be able to do. But he is a 5th-year senior. He does have the composure. He does have the veteran attitude. So, at the end of the day, you can't complain about the quarterback position when you're winning games. And I mean, that's what Kirk Ferentz preaches. Can you really complain if we're winning games? Well, you can find something to complain about, but you really can't complain too much about it if you're winning games. So
it's fair.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Switch over to Washington really fast here, Zach. Washington, obviously, they struggled in this game. It was not a pretty game for them. Looked okay early. Like I said, they tied it up 7-7, but they weren't able to block Iowa's pass rush at all in this game. The defense, this was the absolute worst. This is the absolute worst this Washington defense looked all season long. Will Rogers did not look like himself at all. I don't know what was going on with him in this one other than Iowa. They just had really good defense. So I don't want to take anything away from them. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. One, it's concerning that Jonah Coleman had 9 carries in this game. Yeah. And only 9. Like, he's a stud back. And production was spotty, but he had 80 yards on 9 carries. Now, one of them was a 31-yarder, but there's a couple of thoughts that are ringing through my head. One is that I wonder if Washington they beat Michigan and they kind of got fat and happy off that win. But I do wonder too if the travel. It's funny. Gary Danielson was saying on the broadcast that they seemed like they had energy and that their effort was good, but they were remarking that often the travel is really hard. And remember 2 weeks ago they travel all the way to New Jersey. And then they travel back, and now they travel to Iowa. I don't think the coaching was great in this game, but I also wonder, like, Washington's traveling a ton. And I just wonder if that's impacting them a little bit too.
Yeah, it's so hard for me to try and talk about the travel because it's immeasurable to me, and I want to talk about things that are measurable. Talk about the numbers and what went well, what didn't go well. I want to talk about that stuff, but the travel is just such an immeasurable thing to try and be able to quantify. But at the end of the day, it is a factor. I mean, we've seen it. Teams are losing and teams are struggling that shouldn't be struggling when they have to go cross country. It is totally a factor. And I think that this is going to show up when the Big Ten championship game is at Indiana or in Indianapolis. It's at Indianapolis this year, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Because if you have a team that's out there on the West Coast, i.e. Oregon, coming out to that game, that's going to be tough for them to travel all the way out there. That's going to be essentially be a home game for one of these teams that are around the Midwest going there for it, whether it's Penn State, Ohio State, Indiana at this point, who knows, or Nebraska even, like they're closer. I'm just using them as an example. I'm not saying they're going to make it the Big Ten championship game. They could, but yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
So we'll see if Washington can get back on track next week. They don't have a bye next week, right? They play. That's right, Indiana. Oh no, they do have a bye, and then Indiana because Indiana plays Nebraska. So they are on a bye, and then they'll play at Indiana. So they'll be traveling again. We'll see how that affects them.
Yeah.
So. All right, let's talk about our next game. Got 2 more games left. This one was a doozy, Zach. Penn State defeats USC 33-30 in overtime. Ryan Barker hit a 36-yard field goal in overtime after USC missed a 45-yarder. Tyler Warren was absolutely incredible as Penn State tight end tied an FBS record with 17 receptions, totaling 224 yards and a touchdown. It was Tyler Warren who led the charge for Penn State to rally from a 14-point deficit in the second half. Drew Aller also threw and did well. He had a career high of 391 yards and 2 touchdowns, despite throwing 3 interceptions, but it was the shutting down of Quentin Joyner, who scored 2 early TDs in the first half for USC that helped spark the comeback. The most clutch moment in this game was when Aller converted 2 fourth downs to set up a touchdown pass to Nicholas Singleton, tying the game with 2 minutes and 53 seconds left in the game. The tie would prove to be too much for USC as Michael Lance missed in overtime, and USC drops to 3-3 after losing 3 of its last 4. Zach, let's start with Penn State here. Down early in this one, but coming back to win the game. What do you think of the Nittany Lions?
I mean, obviously early on, I was like, what Penn State team is this? Because I expected them to control the lines of scrimmage, and I expected them to be able to run all day long, and they weren't able to do either of those things. And I was like, wow, this is surprising. And I didn't know if it was more bad Penn State or good USC. But at the end of the day, what I was really impressed with was Drew Aller's poise after having he had a bad day.
Yeah.
And then you're down a touchdown on the road. You hit 2 fourth down passes to Julian Fleming of all the receivers.
He dropped 2 passes earlier in that game, and then he's out here making acrobatic catches on 4th down. It was amazing.
Yeah. And to me, that was such and we'll talk about this a little bit with Ohio State, Oregon too, especially moving forward. But there is something to be said about having an off day and then having to be resilient. And I think for Penn State, this was the moment for them where they got tested, and rather than folding like I think they did a year ago, they were able to keep it going and to be able to win this game. And I think Drew Aller gets a lot of credit in terms of maturing as a quarterback. And I think Julian Fleming, for as, embattled as he's been, to be a senior receiver who transferred, who wasn't going to be a number 1 guy, to make 2 big plays down the stretch. So that's my main takeaway. But my second takeaway, which is just as important, how good is Tyler Warren?
He's fantastic.
He's so freaking good.
He is the best tight end in the nation.
Yes. Yeah, without question.
Now, you could argue Colston Loveland would be that if he had a quarterback to throw to him like Drew Aller, but he doesn't. So, Tyler Warren, congratulations. You're the best tight end in the nation.
He was so good.
He is so good. Yeah, I mean, he was huge for them in this game, obviously, and what Andy Kotelnicki is doing with him, putting him in so many different spots, moving him around the field, it just shows his versatility. And, one of those true football players. Reminds me a little bit of Taysom Hill, with how, you look at him and it's just like, this is a true football player. And obviously, I think he's more talented than Taysom Hill in the NFL is, because he's not really doing all. I don't even know. Is he still with the Saints right now? I forget.
I think so.
He was on my fantasy football team at one point. That's the only reason I know who Taysom Hill is. But I think at the end of the day, like Tyler Warren, what he's able to do, I think if James Franklin doesn't have the coordinators that he has right now, they don't win this game. I think that James Franklin went out and hired the right coordinators, and they were able to come back in this game against USC and get the win. You could definitely feel the impact of a Kotelnicki and a Tom Allen, their experience, their ability to get the offense and the defense going late in the game. USC still scored 10 points in the second half, but that was all they scored, and even in the overtime, they missed the field goal, 45 yards, and that proved to be the difference. So hats off to Penn State. I would have liked to see more. I still think Ohio State probably should be in front of them. Maybe I'm biased. If I am, that's fine. I still think Ohio State should probably be in front of them in the AP poll, but I can't really argue too much with it. Penn State showed resilience. They won on the road, and that's how it goes. So.
John Jacobs is not going to let me get away with
the Kent State stuff, doesn't he?
Listen, man, I got to go to one game in a press box, and I'm going to talk about that game until I die. So
you just wanted to hear about the food. You didn't want to hear about the game.
That's fair. That's fair. The brisket was great.
Penn State guy says Aller completed 69% while throwing for 390 yards. Yeah. Aller. Early on in the game, there were people that were like, "Oh, Drew Aller," when he was throwing those interceptions, and I was like, "Do you know who Drew Aller was last year?" Like, the reason he wasn't throwing interceptions last year was because he wasn't throwing the ball downfield. Now everybody tells him to throw the ball downfield, and he does, and they start picking him off. They're like, "Oh, Drew Aller's going to Drew Aller." Well, guess what? Don't be talking until the end of the game happens, because Drew Aller came out in that second half, albeit a lot of it was to Tyler Warren, but still to Julian Fleming, and he was trusting his guys, to Nicholas Singleton for that score at the end of the game. Like, I know he threw 3 picks in that game, but I was really, really impressed with Drew Aller. And to me, if he's not the best quarterback in the Big Ten, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten.
Yeah. I think to that point, and to that point, you made 2 really good points there that I want to just highlight. One is the downfield passing. Drew Aller averaged about a little over 9 yards an attempt, which is huge for Aller. It's tremendous growth. And that's a good point, Penn State guy, that one of the interceptions was a Hail Mary. I had forgotten about that.
Yeah. That's why I was talking about the 2 in the first.
The 2.
Sorry, I didn't clarify that.
But Aller's big kryptonite was he didn't go downfield, and he went downfield in this game, which was huge. And then the other thing, to your point, JR, his coordinators are like, those hires were excellent. Like, for Tom Allen to be a replacement for a great defensive coordinator in Manny Diaz. And I think Tom Allen, he made good adjustments in the second half. And then I think Kotelnicki, like, Franklin needs a proficient offensive coordinator to be successful. And that's the one area where I'm like, I think Ohio State has the edge in the future matchup. But the fact that it's Kotelnicki directing the offense, I think, does give that game more intrigue than I think in previous years.
Yeah, this is a huge game against Penn State coming up. Ohio State has to get by Nebraska first, and I forget who Penn State has before they get to Ohio State. So they're going to have to get – I'll look it up really fast. I apologize.
They got Wisconsin, which
Wisconsin's playing better, so we don't want –
They're at Camp Randall.
Jump around, watch out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you can't overlook them. But this we could be shaping up for another top 3, top 5 matchup with Ohio State and Penn State, and that's going to be huge. Can you imagine if Texas loses and the top 3 teams are all Big Ten teams? That would be absolutely fantastic.
ESPN won't allow that.
I was going to say, if they lose, they're probably losing to Georgia, so Georgia will probably jump to number 1 if they beat Texas, because that's what
reasons
it does. Yeah. All right. I do want to take a look at last year versus this year a little bit for Penn State, and then we can mention USC for a minute, and then we'll get to commercial and then talk about the Ohio State Oregon game. Last season. So we're halfway through the season. They've played 6 games at this point. Drew Aller in his, 13 games last season, because he did play in the bowl game, I believe. I don't think he missed any games last year. Mm-hmm. So in his 13 games, so we're about halfway through. Drew Aller has 4 interceptions this season to 2 interceptions. I would say he's still playing better. Even though he has less interceptions, I would say he's still playing better, because at the end of the day, his average depth of target this year is 10. Last year, it was 8. His drops that he had last year, 28 on the season. This year, only 6 drops. They had 2 this last game with Julian Fleming. So the drop percentage has went down from 10.7% to 5.5%, and he's been sacked he's been sacked at a little bit of a higher rate, but at the end of the day, he's dropping back more. So, that's kind of what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, I don't have enough good things to say about Drew Aller and what he's able to do this season. And he is going to be the difference. If they're going to defeat an Ohio State and make it to the Big Ten championship game, he's going to be the difference, I feel like. Aaron Tyler Warren, obviously.
Yeah. He is playing exceptionally well right now.
Yeah. Penn State guy says Aller is averaging 14 yards a catch this season. Franklin needs to stay at the playbook and play calling. Yes, I was referencing average depth of target. That's different than that one, because average depth of target is how far the ball was thrown. But yeah, definitely much more impressive from last year. That's all I was trying to get at. Insiders say this is the first time since Joe Moorhead Franklin hasn't meddled in the offense. We like less Franklin meddling, correct, Zach?
Yes, 100%. 100%. Franklin should be nowhere near a playbook offensively. Yeah. Nowhere near it.
Yeah, just
get him out of there.
Let him call timeouts and manage the clock and say, get out of here, James. Oh, boy. The OHIO podcast. Eric just said we just now finished. They had their Oregon episode, and it was
I can't imagine that you guys had anything to talk about, Eric. Can't imagine that you guys had anything to talk about.
Oh, they'll find it. Don't worry there, Zach. They'll find it. We fired almost everybody on the staff before I came on here, so
oh dear.
Not everybody. There is one coach that I feel like needs a looking at, but we'll get to that later on. So USC really fast, and then we'll move on from there. Zach, any thoughts on USC?
I feel like USC did a lot of good things in this game. And
first half was excellent.
Yeah, first half. I thought their line play elevated. Miller Moss, I thought looked like he had looked earlier in the season. Defensively, I thought Danton Lynn brought some good pressure and really deployed his defense well. I honestly, the way I look at the game is I felt like USC elevated, but they just couldn't get it done because they're just not good enough. And a lot of people are saying Lincoln Riley should, they're comparing Lincoln Riley to Clay Helton. I think it's a little unfair because I think that the conference that they're in now, like they're 4-3, I do think there's going to be an adjustment period. And the reality is they beat a top 10. I don't think they're actually top 10, but right now LSU is a top 10 team. They just beat Ole Miss, who I also don't think is good, but there's a lot of qualifiers in this.
Yeah.
But my point is I think it's appropriate to say that USC was in a much weaker conference when Clay Helton was at the helm.
Yeah.
Than they are now. And that includes the elevation of the best teams in the Big Ten. Because I think Penn State's better than they were 7 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I think, for me, this was probably the best pass blocking game we have seen out of USC, unless I'm forgetting one other than the Utah State game. This was probably the best we saw pass protection for Miller Moss, and Miller Moss still struggled. He had a hard time in this game, and that's a credit to Penn State's coverage and what they were able to do. And obviously, that's a credit. Obviously, I'm talking about level of talent and stuff like that here. I'm not saying Penn State didn't get pass rushing. I'm just saying this is one of the best defensive lines in the country, and USC was able to not have Miller Moss pressured every single snap, which that's an improvement for them. So, but at the end of the day, like USC, they need to be able to run the ball, and the run blocking wasn't great in this one. Woody Marks did a good job of getting yards at times, and Quentin Joyner, obviously, he was able to take some different handoffs some different ways. But when you tried to run to the line of scrimmage with behind your offensive line, it wasn't going well. The run blocking wasn't great. And I don't think the numbers depict that from what we saw in the first half. But if you want to win in the Big Ten, especially at home, you're gonna have to bring the trenches with you. And this was a game where Penn State won in the trenches.
Yep.
So
yeah, especially in the second half.
Yeah.
Second half. I think first half, I thought USC matched. I think that's what I was surprised by, was I thought they matched them in the first half. But in the second half, I think they were able to do a bit more business.
Yeah. John Jacobs said, it would be informative to hear you rank the QBs in the Big Ten at some point. I mostly do my rankings on Twitter and stuff just because most people seem to tune out when we do rankings on the show. We've tried to do them and most people just kind of tune out, or it turns into everybody gets in the chat and starts telling us about how stupid we are. So, which that's fine. You can tell us how stupid we are, but it just doesn't make for very good, discussion when I'm going through every single comment. It's like, no, I'm not stupid. I've seen that happen. Yes, I know that happened. But I'll try to make a Big Ten quarterbacks rankings. I did offensive line last week. Penn State fans were not happy about that one. So
yeah,
that's okay.
Doug makes a good point that he's absolutely right. Receivers did not block well. The line blocked better for USC, but the receivers, I don't think Zachariah Branch wants to block.
Definitely not his forte. He wants to get punt returns and kick returns and
just give me the ball. Straight. Give me the ball.
Let me run straight, coach. Yeah, that's a good thing to point out there, Doug. Yeah, definitely not the best blocking from on the perimeter. All right, Zach, let's talk about the big game. We'll do a commercial break. We'll come right back and we'll talk about it. Ohio State, Oregon coming up next. Home Field is your go-to destination for premium collegiate apparel with a passion for comfort and a flair for vintage design. Home Field brings you gear that is comfortable and stylish. With over 150 colleges to choose from, Home Field digs deep into the archives, uncovering forgotten logos, iconic mascots, and legendary moments to create one-of-a-kind apparel. Use my code TBTH for 15% off for new customers, or use my link in the description. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, we appreciate everybody being here with us. We're going to get into our final game. We're going to recap. It is Ohio State at Oregon. Oregon defeated Ohio State 32-31 in a thrilling game. This was one of the best games of the season. Actually, I think it was probably my favorite game I've watched this season. Oregon improved to 6-0, while QB Dylan Gabriel led Oregon with 341 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and a late 27-yard rushing score. Jordan James added 115 rushing yards and a touchdown. Ohio State took a 31-29 lead with a field goal, but Oregon regained it with a 19-yard field goal with a little under 2 minutes left in the game. Ohio State had a final chance, and they did move the ball down the field, but a late offensive pass interference call on the freshman star Jeremiah Smith stalled the drive. Oregon's win marked their highest ranked regular season victory in front of a record crowd at Autzen Stadium. Ohio State QB Will Howard threw for 336 yards, 2 touchdowns, but fumbled a snap late in the game that fell short of, and they also fell short of clock management after the team was pushed out of field goal range. Zach, this is a tough game for Ohio State fans to watch. Obviously, I'm pretty upset about some of the stuff that I saw. I won't get into every single detail because that's stuff that normally the Ohio State shows cover more in depth there. But let's talk about Oregon first, because Oregon deserves to be talked about with what they were able to do and the type of game they played and what they overcame in this game. What were your thoughts on the Oregon Ducks in this one, Zach?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people will talk about Dylan Gabriel. He was phenomenal. I thought Will Stein did a great job of scheming up things. Evan Stewart hadn't really been he had been productive, but he hadn't really had breakout games. Boy, did he have a breakout game. But I think the thing that really impressed me about Oregon was the lines. I thought the offensive line, defensive line, both played well. especially in the second half. I thought the defensive line really tightened up against the run game against Ohio State. I think I saw a stat. It was 12 carries for 18 yards in the second half,
Yep.
which is against this running game was fantastic. That's
Yep.
without Jordan Birch, by the way. Jordan Birch was out. He had a practice injury in practice. So I thought that was just it was a great sign for Oregon in that their line play. I thought most of the time they were dead even with Ohio State, and at times we were getting more wins than losses in the line play. That was the thing that stood out to me. But Will Stein, I think, as the offensive coordinator, called a really good game going downfield when they hadn't been going downfield as much throughout the season. They had done thinking and dunking.
Really felt like they saved some of that Evan Stewart stuff for this game, right?
Yeah, which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I think both Ohio State and Oregon fans were saying we're saving stuff for each other. I'm like, well, of course. But I think that was the adjustment was we need to give Dylan Gabriel time and make sure he can navigate the pocket so he can see his receivers downfield to hit those shots. And they did it, and they did it well. And they did it against the top cornerback for Ohio State and Denzel Burke, which we'll talk about him in a minute. But I thought the game plan was fantastic by the Ducks.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to give hats off to the Ducks. The Ducks overcame, that call at the beginning of the game where it was definitely an interception. There was no doubt about it. I think Dan Lanning should have called a timeout there. I do think that he needs to learn from that because, at the end of the day, they probably should have stopped the game, but Chip Kelly with his veteran offensive play calling experience, he got that team in the line as soon as he possibly could and said, get there and let's just snap the ball. Who cares what happens next? Just snap the ball so we don't get rid of it. And that's what they did. I think Dan Lanning definitely should have called a timeout there, but the rest of the game was spectacular from Dan Lanning. I think he totally did the 12 players on the field at the end of the game on purpose. You saw that guy run in late. Yeah. Which if you don't know what I'm talking about, which it's kind of a complicated thing, so I don't want to get into it too much because it's going to be really difficult to try to explain. So what happened was Ohio State, they got the 15-yard offensive pass interference, which pushed them out of field goal range. And so Ohio State put 3 wide receivers on one side of the field, which if you have 3 wide receivers on one side of the field, that's confusing for the defense to try to guard. And so Oregon put 1 cornerback on Jeremiah Smith on the other side of the field, and there were just a bunch of corners, safeties, everybody over on the other side of the field with those 3 receivers. So much so that you looked and you said, oh my gosh, they have 12 guys on the field. Well, it was actually a genius call because they took away all 3 of those wide receivers, and Will Howard threw a pass to Jeremiah Smith that was incomplete. And a 12-man penalty on the field, that's not called dead at the beginning of a play. So whatever time ran off the clock in that play, yes, Ohio State got 5 yards, but whatever time ran off the clock in that play, which was 4 seconds, that time ran off the clock, which doesn't give Ohio State enough time, which we saw with Will Howard trying to run and call a timeout, but it doesn't give Ohio State enough time to try and do a run play or anything like that, just to get a little bit more yardage to help the field goal kicker, and that proved to be the downfall. Now we could argue, about the clock management and stuff because the penalty on Jeremiah Smith, the clock was running, which brought it down to 10 seconds. Again, if you didn't watch the game, this is really difficult for me to try to explain, so I'm not going to stick on it for too much. But it was just Dan Lanning. He was aggressive, and he called a really good game. The onside kick I wasn't even sure if it was on purpose or not. It definitely was after we saw the reactions and everything. That was a great call. You got to tip your hat to Dan Lanning. This was a game where both teams played really well. And I know Ohio State fans, myself included, will nitpick the things like Denzel Burke and the defensive line and stuff like that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Ohio State did enough to win. Oregon did enough to win. It's just unfortunate. One of the teams had to win and one of the teams had to lose. And Oregon was the one that, they played until the end. Not that Ohio State didn't play until the end, but they kept making plays until the end, and they came out with the W.
Yeah. And I'll say 2 more things. One is about Oregon. One is that this was in a vacuum. This was just a great football game.
Yeah.
And great. Both teams are really, really good. Like, I think these are two of the top 3 teams in the country. And I think part of Oregon's win, and this is not meant to take a shot at Oregon or anything. This is more just to highlight how dangerous it is to play at Autzen.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people were surprised by the crowd noise, and I think I shared it on here. I had a couple from Oregon that I was talking with after a Penn State game. They came to see Penn State, Ohio State a couple years ago, and I said, "Well, what was that environment like compared to Autzen?" And they're like, "Happy Valley's quiet." And I'm like, say that again?
Yeah.
Like, cause like the whiteout, I've been to a whiteout and it's nuts. And they were like, this ain't anything. And from what we've heard from Ohio State fans that were there, and like you could see it, like there were a lot of false start penalties. And that was one of my keys to me picking Oregon was I just thought the crowd noise was going to be a factor in that game. And I think that is something that to account for that, a
It
lot of procedure
completely stole away a
penalties.
drive. I mean, there was
Yeah.
a drive that Ohio State literally could not do anything because they had multiple false start penalties. Like that is so huge that the crowd would completely take away a drive. So you had Oregon completely take away a drive with the onside kick,
Yeah.
and then you had the crowd completely take away a drive just by getting false start penalties. Like, I mean, I just got to give hats off. Like
Yeah.
I'm upset obviously with Ohio State losing, but just you got to give hats off to Oregon and how well they played and how well they adjusted and they took advantage of the areas that they could take advantage of.
Yep.
So
Yeah, for sure.
a few comments here really fast, and then we'll talk about Ohio State. John Jacob says, is Ryan Day on the hot seat? I don't want to get too much into it. If you talk to certain Ohio State fans, he is. I think it's kind of silly for me personally, but I definitely think there are staff members that need to be looked at. And if Ryan Day refuses to do that, then maybe you do need to talk about Ryan Day moving on. But at the end of the day, like, I think you start with a couple position coaches before you go to Ryan Day. That's just me personally, though.
Yeah,
I know I don't.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I don't align with every Ohio State fan, so I can't speak for all of them. Eric, we'll get to Denzel Burke in a second. Doug says, looks like now letting the kicker go to Alabama in the portal while he was in the state of Ohio. Yeah, they should have got it. They should have got, what was he from? Miami? Ball State? No, he's from Miami, Ohio. He won the Groza last year.
That's right.
And
Yeah,
Alabama.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, that was a huge miss. They should have taken him, or at least
looked at him,
tampered to get him anymore.
Yeah.
So, Snowbird says, what people don't understand is that Oregon Stadium was built and designed to amplify and hold a noise. And it was an Ohio State grad that built it. That's the craziest thing. Like the connections there are so crazy. But yeah, it's an amazing build, and I mean just a fantastic stadium, and where it's at with those mountains as well. Whatever kind of rock it is, I know that there's been some research about how that doesn't really absorb the sound, and it just kind of keeps the sound going all around there. It's just it's fantastic. Fantastic location for a game and a fantastic stadium. Brian Myers with the Go Bucks. Always Go Bucks.
Yep, Go Bucks.
And then Doug says some fans calling for Day to be fired have been saying that since he was hired. It's true. I don't really blame the fans too much. I when I got on the Ohio State show, I was maybe a little bit more animated about it than I should have been, just because I felt like it wasn't fair. I do understand the emotional reaction where people are coming from, where it's like, we want better than what we're currently getting. But I just, what annoys me is when you try to look at the logistics of it and you try to say, okay, if we do fire him, what happens? And then they can't actually give you any, what happens. They're living off their emotions, which is fine. It's an emotional game. Football is an emotional game. I'm not against anybody having emotions, but anyway. All right, Zach, let's start with Ohio State now. Denzel Burke had an awful game, gave up nearly 200 yards himself, 2 touchdowns. Dylan Gabriel was picking on him. Tez Johnson was picking on him. Evan Stewart was picking on him. We saw Dylan Gabriel for the first time this season throw the ball to the right side of the field, 20-plus yards. That was the first time he did it this season. He did it multiple times against Denzel Burke. If I'm not mistaken, I think Dylan Gabriel only had 1 incompletion beyond 10 yards in this game. That is absolutely fantastic. I don't care who you are. If you do that against any team, That's fantastic. Your thoughts, Zach?
So I thought there was a lot of good in this game, and I think I don't want to start with the negatives because I think Will Howard, people are picking on him for those last 6 seconds. Will Howard proved he's the guy. And he had a couple of bad plays aside from the slide or the 6 seconds. He dropped a snap. That killed him just maybe as much, if not more so, than the slide. And then there's one other play that was not good. I'm trying to remember what it was. Oh, it was the sack early in the last drive. But other than that,
He more just Will Howard falling down rather than
he just stumbled.
Yeah.
But like outside of that, he was phenomenal all game long. And I think that bodes very well for Ohio State moving forward, because I think that was the biggest concern. I thought the offensive line, there were good things. There were not some good things. We'll talk about the injury in a minute. But I thought the receivers, I thought they played well for the most part. Smith, he did not have his greatest game, but he still had 100 yards, 9 catches, and they battled back.
The receivers played the best game out of anybody. Like, other than the offensive pass interference, like, I think Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka together played a better game than Will Howard.
I thought Egbuka was great.
Yeah, Egbuka was awesome.
Yeah, Egbuka was great. Smith was great. I would agree with you. I just am saying, I think the concern for me with Will Howard was he wouldn't be good enough to win a big game.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's definitely good enough.
Oh yeah. Like, I don't think they lost this game because of Will Howard. He certainly didn't deliver.
Yeah, he was the one with the ball in his hand at the end of the game. So, like, if you're just casually watching it, you would say they lost because of Will Howard, but this game was lost by the defense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the, so that being said, there's a lot of positives in this game. They went into a tough environment. They battled back. And especially for a new world of a 12-team playoff, like, I think that matters because you're like, this isn't a disqualifier like it would have been several years ago. Now, well, I'm curious if you have thoughts before I go into my negatives.
No, I was just going to say, I think this is just the new world of college football that, fans are going to have to get used to, specifically Ohio State fans, is that you are getting into college football now where it's more NFL-like, where you're going to have tougher schedules. The years of Ryan Day going 2-3 years with never losing to a Big Ten team, like,
it's over.
It's not going to happen. You're not going to have somebody come into the conference and just dominate the conference right away and do all that. Like, it's just, the conference is too good now. You have too much money being flowed to these different schools that are trying to get recruits and get good players, and then are trying to get the best coaches possible. Like, the Big Ten is no longer on par financially with all these other schools. The Big Ten is making the most money out of anybody, which means the schools have the most money to spend on their programs, and it's gonna happen. I mean, it's gonna bode well for them in the future in schools that really, really want to be good, like Oregon, which I wish every school wanted to be really, really good, like Oregon is. That you see them spending their money accordingly, and I'm not knocking them for that. I think it's great. And that's where you get. So anyway, go ahead, get into your negatives.
Well, and I think it's just helpful to note, like, Oregon's an elite team. Like, they're not a really good team. They're an elite team.
Yeah, they're best team in the country in my mind.
Yeah. So I think for people saying, well, why are we losing midseason? It's because we've never played a top 2 caliber team midseason over the past 12 years.
Yeah, you had Notre Dame at the beginning of the season when I think they were top 5.
They don't count.
But yeah, I think that's the only thing. Penn State were they ever top 5?
They were, but the rankings are misleading.
Yeah.
Like, I think we knew
season you think they'll be top 5 regardless.
Yeah, like, Oregon can win a national championship.
Yeah.
Those Penn State teams, that Notre Dame team, they weren't winning national championships. Yeah. And granted, it's hindsight, but
and Brian's right. 2016, 2018 Penn State, but I think you're talking about when Ryan Day was there.
Yeah, when Ryan Day was the head coach. Sorry. Yeah, Brian, that's a good catch.
No, but Ryan's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and Doug makes a good. It's on the road. So, like, the degree of difficulty, and like Ohio State hadn't played any, like Iowa's good, but they're one dimensional. They hadn't really played anybody. So you're like ratcheting the difficulty level from like a 3 to a 10. So like, I think you have to have all that context in mind.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is this isn't in a vacuum. So you have all that context, but also this is the same story over the past 5 years with Ryan Day against elite teams.
Yeah.
It's the exact same script.
This was a mixture of Michigan 2022 and Georgia 2022.
Yeah.
The end of the game and the defense put together.
Yeah. And I think that's why I totally don't agree with the fire Ryan Day. But like, we got the worst version of Denzel Burke. Like, I've never seen him, like, he was slow and he was caught up and he couldn't tackle. And for that matter, I felt like the whole team struggled to tackle. I'm like, what is, like, Oregon out physicaled them. And that was shocking to me because I thought Ohio State,
the defense.
Yes. Yeah. I thought the offense
was out physical. And I think,
yeah,
I think the offensive line trying to get new starters in there, starters getting out, losing left tackle, Josh Simmons. I mean, I think that was the worst thing that happened in this game for Ohio State.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would argue that the Josh Simmons injury puts their national championship hopes at a big risk.
Yeah.
Bigger than this loss.
Yeah, this was a big game that is defining a lot of things for Ohio State right now. Ohio State went into the year thinking that that Will Howard could be just a guy and that he would have a defense and playmakers on the outside that would carry him. And we found out in this game that's not the case. The defense will not carry Ohio State this season, at least the way they played on Saturday. This is a defense that is officially a liability, specifically the defensive line and Larry Johnson. I talked about there's a position coach that I think needs to be looked at seriously, but Larry Johnson is that guy. He needs to be looked at, and he's not working well right now with Jim Knowles. Jim Knowles wants to do a whole lot of different things with the defensive line, and Larry Johnson is inhibiting those things from happening. And I believe, I don't know this for sure, but I believe it's for his own good and not the good of the team, which in my mind, if you have somebody putting themselves before the team, or I guess he's also probably putting his defensive line room before the team, you need to seriously take a look at why is he here and should he continue to be here? If that is true, he should not continue to be there. And that's why I think Larry Johnson needs to go. I think Tim Walton needs to be looked at with why he didn't put Jermaine Matthews in there. Not calling for Tim Walton's job at all, but you have to be able to say you have one of the best backup cornerbacks in the nation, in Jermaine Matthews. He was freshman All-American last year, and Jermaine Matthews, and Denzel Burke just doesn't have it today. Why you can't put Jermaine Matthews in there and at least give him a shot? He couldn't have been worse than Denzel Burke. It shows that Tim Walton had a very hard time with putting the best option in there and not taking Denzel Burke off the field. I know Denzel Burke didn't give up a whole lot of big plays in the second half, but he wasn't much better tackling in the second half either.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I think that was so there's that. And then there's also just a disappearing act of the run game.
Yeah.
Like, now Judkins there was rumor that Judkins had an injury, and I don't think that was,
I know the guy that started that. He was being weird.
Okay. But like, Judkins didn't have a great game. Henderson had a couple of good runs, but other than that, like, they could not run the ball. And again, that feels eerily similar to like other collapses or other struggles in big games. Is they couldn't run the ball. The defense got exploited, and that just wasn't what I expected going into this game. I thought they'd be able to run some. I thought they'd be able to control more of the line of scrimmage from a running standpoint, and they couldn't. And they got the tough yards. I'll say that. Like, they rolled out the wing tee, but Yeah, I think that's the thing that's so disconcerting to me is that, like, I don't think the defense I think this defense is good enough to play against everybody else on their schedule before the Big Ten championship game.
Yeah.
But if you got to play Oregon again, which my guess is they will have to, or if they got to play Alabama, or if they got to play Tennessee, or they got to, they got to play, I, I think that's how Ohio State is measured, is against these elite teams.
Yeah.
And
it's how they should be measured.
Yeah. And if they can't figure it out, like, forget just the position coach, like you got to look at everybody on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
Because this is year 3 of Knowles. And if I hear Knowles say one more time, well, it's on coaching. I'm like, dude, you are the coach.
Yeah.
Coach him.
If it's on coaching, you got to look at the coaches.
Yeah. So I'm curious, JR, do you know what Larry Johnson is doing that's hindering Knowles?
So it's going to be a little boring for people who don't know the Ohio State program super well, so I'll keep it brief. But essentially what is believed to be going on is that Jim Knowles wants to institute a 4th defensive lineman who is also kind of like a hybrid linebacker, the jack position, if you've heard that before. He wants to institute that more. However, Larry Johnson does not want to take one of his 4 defensive linemen off the field. The jack position guy would probably be like a Mitchell Melton or a CJ Hicks in this situation. And so Jim Knowles is not getting what he wants by putting a Mitchell Melton or CJ Hicks, who is really more of a linebacker who can play close to the line of scrimmage. He's not getting that right now because Larry is being very stubborn and wanting to keep all 4 of his defensive linemen on the field instead of taking one off so that way they can put in the jack position player, which really is a fantastic idea. You have a guy who can roam back and forth between linebacker and defensive line. Like, the offense doesn't know what kind of front they're going to get. However, when they roll out there 2 defensive tackles and 2 defensive ends, that's going to be a 4-man defensive front. So
yeah,
but that's what I've gathered from it.
Yeah, which is interesting because one of my thoughts throughout the game, and I felt this the past 3 years, is there is very little creativity defensively.
And that's part of the reason.
Yeah.
It's because you have to have 4 down linemen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just saying the jack is probably one of the biggest things. So
yeah.
Penn State guy asks, I've seen some blaming of Larry Johnson for OSU's issues. What about that? Any truth to it? I think I outlined that correctly. If you need more clarity on that, please let me know, Penn State guy. But I think I outlined that pretty clearly. John Jacobs, JR, Ohio State's defense is a liability, so maybe Indiana has a chance. They totally have a chance. I mean, if the defensive backs, Denzel Burke, is going to play that way, Indiana has very good wide receivers. They have some of the best wide receivers in the Big Ten, possibly a top 10 wide receiver core in the nation. I mean, Indiana's wide receivers are very underrated. They have had a very good season. Curtis Rourke has been getting, more of the praise and stuff like that, but it's been a very good year for the Indiana wide receivers. So if Denzel Burke doesn't lock down and get better, there definitely could be some truth to that. So Doug Shepard, he's never been a great tackler. I think you're talking about Burke. No, he's never been a great tackler, but I would never say it was like the biggest issue. It wasn't Cam Martinez or Cam Brown or Shaw. What was his first name? Bryson Shaw. Yeah, and Doug's agreeing with me. If Burke plays like that against Indiana, yeah, they have a chance. Trying to make sure I don't miss any comments here, guys. John, fire Ryan Day and bring in Deshaun Foster.
Hey, we're
no, John.
We're in Columbus. That's where we play football.
Doug says, if LJ is let go or retires, how many recruits and current players will they lose? So I talked about this on the OHL podcast. And again, I'm getting very deep into, the roots of Ohio State stuff right now. I apologize if you're just a Big Ten fan. I'm not trying to bore you with this, or maybe you like it. If you do, then I can do this more often, but just let me know. So the plan was for Larry Johnson to retire and kind of take on an analyst role or a smaller role in the program, so that way he could continue working with the players. And last year they thought that the analysts and guys like that were going to be able to work more hands-on with the players. That rule did not change until this year. So I don't think that they'll let Larry Johnson go. I think it'll be a kind of like encouraged retirement, please be an analyst type of deal. Since that rule has been changed, I feel like that could happen, but Larry Johnson is just very stubborn. I mean, he wants what he wants, i.e. the problems I just went over with the defensive line and the lack of creativity and stuff like that. So, I'm sure Ryan Day is going to push for him to retire, have one of those analyst roles or something like that. But, at the end of the day, he's not going to, you can't force somebody to retire. You can't fire them into retirement. If you're going to fire somebody, you have to fire them.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens. I don't think it's the biggest issue going on right now, but it is an issue that I think needs to be addressed.
Yep.
So, anything else on this game, Zach?
No, I still think it was a great game. I would be shocked if this isn't the Big Ten championship game. And I think both teams have something, I've seen comments out there saying Oregon should have won by three touchdowns because of X, Y, and Z. And Ohio State fans are saying, oh, they should have won by 3 touchdowns because of X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, I think we're going to get another classic in Indy.
Yeah. And Snowbird seems to agree. He says, I still think Ohio State is the better team. Autzen will eat up the best of them on a neutral field. I would put my money on Ohio State to you, Snowbird. On Ohio coaching decisions have to get better, though. I agree. That's one of the reasons why I don't say it was just Autzen, is because Dan Lanning did make such good coaching decisions.
Yeah.
Yes, the crowd stole away possession, but so did Dan Lanning. So,
I was going to say, FYI, I don't watch College Game Day often. I happened to turn it on when they were telling the story of Dan Lanning and his wife. Dude, I nearly cried. I was running on the treadmill, but if you guys have a chance, go watch his story with his wife. His wife battled cancer, was able to go through it and beat it. It was really shocking. Like, it felt very much like a little bit of my story, actually, because I think some of you guys know my wife had cancer earlier this year.
Yeah.
And although I think their journey was much more of it was a much longer road for them. And it was really cool. And you just saw, I was really impressed by Dan Lanning in that story, and just how he loves his wife, loves his family, and loves, really points his players to be better men. So
that's why I don't like taking shots at all these coaches and stuff like that. There's a bunch of people that take shots at Ryan Day, and I don't really like that. And that's why I never really like to take shots at coaches. I know sometimes I'll joke around, and maybe the joking gets a little too far for people at times. If that does happen, I apologize. I'm not trying to take personal shots at coaches, but these guys make tons of money and do their stuff, but they got lives. They got people they care about, people they love, just like anybody else. And, they're not living at the building all day long like some people might think they do.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And if they are, they're taking the antidote of confidence.
Yeah, that's true. They are. Doug says, imagine both teams on a neutral field would be a banger. It would. Yeah. That would be a really, really fun game. Through Zero says, conspiracy theory, Ohio State knew they were going to meet in the championship game and didn't want to show everything. There we go. They didn't show everything, Zach. So they come back in the championship game. They won't show anything for the rest of the season. That is a conspiracy theory. What do you think,
at this point? At this point, I want Ohio State to show something, anything
on defense.
Yes.
I was about to ask you a question, but we're getting late here, so we'll go ahead and just end it here and jump off. So unless anybody else has anything, throw it in the chat really fast. But that's gonna conclude our recap episode of Week 7. We appreciate all of you watching, and appreciate you being here. We'll have a preview episode out Tuesday night, or not out. We'll be going live Tuesday night at 9:00. And like I said, don't forget to head on over to the Voice of College Football Ohio State channel call-in show on the Voice of College Football Ohio State channel. We'll start at 9 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow night. Like I said, you want to come talk Ohio State with us, ask more about Larry Johnson, we can do that. If you want to talk Big Ten. That's fine too. So we really appreciate all of you watching and putting up with our shenanigans. So it's a great time. Zach, you want to tell anybody anything about Big Ten football talk?
Thursday, we're doing our mid-season review. So I'm sure a lot of what we talked about tonight will be relevant, but probably do kind of what surprised me, what I was surprised by, what I got right, what I got wrong. My Purdue thoughts will probably highlight the list of things I got wrong, although they showed some life this week. So, but that'll be Thursday morning.
Very good. Very good. All right, everybody. And thank you, Doug. Yes, thank you. We do our best. And yes, please hit the like button before you leave here, if you do not mind. All right, everybody. Have a great night. And we will see you next time. See ya.